Welcome back, everybody. We are here with champion swimmer and diver, also champion for women, someone who has just been blazing trails left and right for women. Riley Gaines, it's wonderful to have you. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, I told you guys off camera, it's always nice to sit with two pretty ladies, so really excited.
I know, we have a three-lady panel here, so plenty to talk about. Okay, but I want to take away from us for just a moment. We have a lot of guys on our tech crew, and, a lot of us, we have men in our life. And this was something you touched on briefly on stage a few moments ago, but for our audience who wasn't able to see that, I have long since felt like in this fight, obviously women have to be fighting for the things that you are fighting for, but men have a responsibility too, don't they?
Certainly. Yeah. We need men, and I think we're at this point where we're at because men have failed. Yeah. And not to put it entirely on them, of course it's we need to work together, but men have failed. Men are supposed to be strong. They need to fulfill their biblical role of really protecting and providing. And I think we're seeing men more often now kind of resort to not wanting any responsibility. Yeah. They don't want any accountability. But that being said, I think we have a big part to blame for that to the feminist movement. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because we emasculated men. Exactly. We told men, no uterus, no opinion, and now they don't want to help on issues where we need their help.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we kind of shot ourselves in the foot with that one. Unfortunately, men don't have to hold any responsibility. Yeah. As you were talking about your experience in the locker room with Leah Thomas, I kept thinking, where were the coaches? Where was the administration? Where are the parents? So what do you say to high schoolers or parents of high schoolers that might be dealing with this?
Defend your daughters. Yeah. I was 21 at the time. I was an adult, I guess technically, right? But I was still looking for those people who were supposed to be protecting us to protect us. And again, it's the same theme of where they failed miserably. And so parents, dads, moms, defend your daughters. Stick up for them regardless of the risk. You might work in corporate America. Who cares? Your daughters need you.
Yeah. And coaches too. Where was your coach standing up for y'all?
My coach, I had a lot of support from my coach privately, which, at the time I could sympathize with, but I really don't now because in those private messages of thanks and the private conversations of gratitude, more women are being exploited in locker rooms, more women are losing out on opportunities, more women are being injured in their sports. Mm-hmm. The more we continue to have these private conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. In this whole, let's call it a story. Let's pretend like this is a movie. In this whole movie about transgenderism, madness, biological men being in women's sports, where are we in the story arc? Do you think that we have yet reached the climax where we can start returning back to sanity, or have things not gotten bad enough yet?
I think we're certainly reaching that point if we're not there yet. The tide is turning. People, especially parents, right? Mad mama bears, they're waking up and they're realizing they don't want the government to come in between their parental rights.
Right.
Kirk Cameron says, these aren't the White House's children, they're our house's children.
Right.
And so I think we're certainly reaching the point where the tide is turning. People are becoming more emboldened, more empowered to say the truth, to say common sense, and courage begets courage. And so it's kind of spreading like a wildfire. Unfortunately, sometimes it does have to get worse before it gets better, but I think we're certainly reaching that point.
You've been swimming against the current, pun intended.
Dad joke, I love it.
I'm curious. You're such a rebel, honestly, in your age group. Are a lot of peers coming out and supporting you, a lot of Gen Z, or do you think that Gen Z is actually giving you a lot of pushback? Where do you feel the most pushback?
I would say majority of Gen Z agrees that this is too far, especially as it pertains to sports. Again, it just goes back to people being scared to say it. The amount of messages that I get from girls my age who say, thank you for doing what you're doing. I'm dealing with this on my own, or I couldn't imagine the violation of having to share a locker room with a man. Yeah. And so I think that the support within my generation is certainly there. Again, it's just about feeling comfortable and vulnerable and confident enough to be vulnerable.
Yeah. I'm curious, as you are out and about, I know from day to day you are doing different forms of activism. When you're out and about, do you ever have people who cop up to the fact that they're Democrats but that they see your side and they stand with you.
All the time. I have formed so many allies in this fight that I never would have imagined.
Yeah.
Right? Martina Navratilova has become a
Yeah.
great friend and advocate for this.
Yeah.
Granted, there's not a lot of other issues we agree on, but that's the beauty of this issue, is it reaches beyond party lines.
Yeah.
And so I've met so many people who would claim to be lifelong liberals who have said this is too far. I actually had one lady say to me, again, someone who voted for Biden, all of those things, she said, how can you defend what you can't define? And I thought that was so powerful because we have a sitting Supreme Court justice who can't define what a woman is because she claims she's not a biologist, yet you claim to be advocating for us and protecting us, and you don't even know what we are as women. So I just thought that was really powerful.
And if you can't interpret gender, how are you going to interpret the Constitution? That's the worst part.
It's crazy. What do you think is the path back to normalcy? Is it legislation? Is it just complete culture overhaul? Like, how are we going to get to a point where we are again saying with confidence, men are men, women are women, and let's respect that?
Legislation is important in terms of creating policies that would prevent, a lot of this stuff from happening in sports and locker rooms and prisons, domestic violence shelters, and those regions. But I'll tell you the most effective and the quickest way to make change: women have to boycott their sports. Yeah. If you're up against a male, don't go off the block. Don't go when the gun goes. Yeah. It's the quickest and most effective way. And so that's what we need to see. That would be really powerful in sending the message that we've had enough.
Okay, I know you said on stage, don't get me started on Megan Rapinoe, but I really want to get you started on Megan Rapinoe because I want to talk about the woke side of sports. And obviously, your dealings with Leah Thomas. Actually, let's shift gears. I want to ask you about Leah Thomas because for someone like that, someone who in this situation I think is probably the manifestation of deep sadness and deep mental health issues, what does the future look like for someone like that, for someone like him?
Well, he's in law school to become a civil rights lawyer. Of course. Yeah. Right? Like literally, of course he is. Yeah. It is really sad because these people who are putting their entire identity within this social construct, they're not getting the help that they really need. We're not getting to the root of the problem. Yeah. When we affirm these delusions and different things in this dysphoria, it's essentially like putting a Band-Aid on the problem because we're not fixing the problem. Right. What these people need and what we should be advocating for is the adequate mental health care to help these individuals. Yeah. That's what they need. And so the problem isn't being fixed. And I can speak to, just based off of what Thomas posts on his personal, public social medias and different things, openly a Satanist, openly a communist, openly a part of Antifa and all those different things. And I just think that says a lot about his level of happiness.
Yeah. Well, student loan payments are over, so I hope he's paying for his law degree out of pocket.
I love that you brought up the fact that he's now communist, Satanist, because it all goes hand in hand. And you do get up on stage and you talk about Jesus and you talk about the Bible and you talk about God. I went to a very, very liberal school where right as I stepped on campus, I had the whole genders the spectrum ideology pushed on me, and I really believed it. But that's because I didn't have necessarily a faith to lean back on. I didn't have convictions to lean back on. So one thing I always tell parents is, don't affirm these newfound ideas because it's not the truth. And to love someone is to tell them the truth. So, do you have any more advice for what parents can do to help, what young people can do? Like, how can they support you in this?
Absolutely. First and foremost, it's important to be educated, and I hate saying that because it makes me sound like an activist, which, I guess I am an activist, but when I think of an activist, I think of someone with blue hair and who's screeching. But it is important to be educated. It's important to know what's going on. The people you're voting for, don't just vote because they have an R by their name. Yeah. Right. Look up their policies. Think for yourself, and don't be afraid to admit when you're wrong. I think those are two of the scariest things about our society is the inability to think for ourselves and the unwillingness to admit when we're wrong. And so be able to comprehend things on your own. You don't need to look to social media or just copy and paste what you hear in the news. Think for yourself. Yeah. Of course, get out and vote. Go to the polls. I think too often, and being from Nashville too, this is something that we're facing now because we just elected a new mayor who's a Democrat.
Another Democrat.
And everyone is mad about it. But of the 1.9 million people in Nashville, only 100,000 went out and voted. And so it's like, you don't get to complain
Exactly.
when you did this.
Didn't vote.
Yeah. So get out, vote, go to the polls. It's crucial. It's necessary. Parents, defend your daughters just as much as you defend your daughters. Teach your sons masculinity. Back to that conversation of needing strong men. Teach your sons how to be strong men.
Yeah.
Fathers, be present. Be there for your kids, your sons. They need you.
Okay, one last question, because I know you have to go. You're very busy. A lot of people want your time. It has become very apparent that the notion of children wanting to be gender non-binary or of the opposite sex, it's becoming very apparent that that's trendy. I think that is a signal that something is missing in their life, and it seems that it is being filled, that void is being filled by social media. How much do you think social media contributes to this epidemic?
It is the epidemic, social media. We have never seen rates, I guess really this exponential increase in any subject throughout history, but it just goes to show you how impactful and how influential social media is. Talk to someone like Chloe Cole or Luca Hine or Prisha or all these wonderful women who are now suing their medical institutions, and they'll all tell you that they were influenced on social media.
Yeah.
It's a huge part in influencing our behaviors and our beliefs. Because it's so readily accessible. You can find anything on the internet at the tip of your fingers. And so it's certainly, I think social media is the epidemic.
Yeah, and those lawsuits matter, and those lawsuits, I think, need to make those doctors hurt, because I think that's another way to push back is medically. Make it hurt worse for them to perform the surgery than it does to not perform it and to get blowback from the woke side. Riley Gaines,
Absolutely.
we appreciate you so much. Everything you're doing is fantastic. You are such an inspiration. Thanks for being here.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after this.